Welcome to Conversations with a Wounded Healer. I'm your host, Sarah Bueno. I'm a psychotherapist, teacher, consultant, and most importantly, a wounded healer, living and working in Chicago, Illinois.
And I'm your host, Anne Remy. I'm a counseling psychotherapist, yoga teacher, and trauma specialist living in Brighton, UK. On this show, we interview folks in a variety of healing professions, and we discuss the intersectional journey of healing self while caring for others.
But we're not just focused on individual healing, but also healing on the collective level, from white supremacy, late-stage capitalism, and the patriarchy. Thanks for joining us. Hello, Anne.
Hello, Sarah.
Hi.
Hi.
Happy New Year again.
Happy again New Year.
Yeah. It's almost my birthday,
Oh, huzzah.
so I'm excited about that.
What day's your birthday?
February 1st.
Oh, that's a good day for birth.
Isn't it?
I feel like.
I know. And it's a Thursday. Thursday's child has far to go. And here I go. Do you know that?
Was that the day you were born
Mhm.
in? Like born
Yeah.
on? I was at, what's Friday's child? I think I was born on a Friday.
Friday's child is Cuckoo Bananas. No, I don't know. I don't remember that one,
Yeah.
actually. Wednesday's child is Full of Woe. That's the only other one
Oh.
I remember.
I'm going to look it up.
You're going to Google it now?
Fridays.
Because we clearly need to know the answer to this question.
Child. Friday's child is loving and giving. Oh.
Oh, well,
You're welcome.
yeah. What's new with you on this almost my birthday time?
On this almost your birthday time, I'm getting ready to go for Valentine's Day. Who can think of anything more romantic than flying to Rwanda to run a workshop at the African Education Festival?
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That
I'm
sounds
super
fancy.
excited. Yeah, so I'm running a workshop in trauma-informed teaching and helping educators learn to support their students and learn to support themselves.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, because teachers are on the front line of childhood trauma and they don't get trained for that
Mhm.
shit. So super excited to collaborate with all the amazing educators.
That's
will be there.
really cool. How
Yeah.
far is the flight to Rwanda from where you are?
I think it's direct flight is like 8 hours.
Oh, that's not bad.
No, it's like the same as flying to Chicago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wait, I don't know anything about flying overseas. I'm not good at it. Anyway, next topic. If you would like to fly overseas to support us, no. But if you would like to support us and not fly overseas,
Yeah, there you go.
you can do so by buying merch. You can go to tinyurl.com/CWH merch. You can join us on Patreon
Mhm.
at patreon.com/convos with a wounded healer. And the easiest thing to do is rate this podcast.com/wounded healer and tell us that you're picking up what we're putting down.
Takes 2 minutes.
Yep. Not even,
Not even.
because you don't have to write something 2 minutes long. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Anne,
How
how did you enjoy my conversation with Key?
Loved it. Loved it so much. So when she was talking about, she says something about a lot of our struggles being as a result of like our lack of connection to nature. I was like, yes, because I've been feeling that so hard recently. And one of my New Year's resolutions was to spend more time outside, specifically in the woods, but any outside really, and to bake using more like herbal ingredients. So more like herby flavored cakes, which is, I don't know, maybe sounds silly, but I'm into it.
That's lovely. Yeah.
Yeah. That like landed with me as like a theory. And then when you two are talking about, she says something about the therapy space potentially being the only place where our clients can fully belong, including their shadow sides. I wrote that down, and I swear in like the 30 seconds of that chunk of the conversation, it renewed my energy for being a therapist in a way that I didn't know I needed. I loved it so much.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's lovely to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Loved it so much.
Yeah. Well, and I was curious too, because, as I've been sort of talking about the systemic things that I see and I have fears about, and that's a lot of what Key and I started talking about. I was curious what you thought about that.
About,
like, Key is seeing the similar struggles that I'm seeing in terms of like where the choice points of the field and, how we're sort of, we got choices to make.
it's funny because one of the things that she said, I think you had some really beautiful self-awareness in this episode as well.
Thanks.
And I think in one of those conversations, you're both talking about how the sort of like activator part of you is like, no, everybody needs to like do this shit and like get really like militant about it. And she said, I see that rise up in me. And then I have to bring in this other part to go, we're working on it. It's okay. You can relax. And I really heard, because she talks about Tara Brach, and I heard Tara Brach like shine through there. And that's kind of how I feel in general, where like the activist, like activator part of me is always there, will never go away. But the other part of me who is always there is like, okay, yes. And you can't expect everybody to get on your level all the time. You can't even be on your own level all the time. Otherwise, everybody burns out or you push someone into something they're not ready for. And she really explained that really beautifully. And I was like, it put words to something that I am already naturally doing. And it was really nice to hear words first for that, because it's not letting yourself off the hook for like accountability and doing the work. It's it's recognizing the work you are doing, giving yourself a chance to go, is this enough right now? Or is it not enough right now? Or am I pushing too hard on the other person? So it just gives everybody some grace and compassion, which I'm here for.
Yeah. Great. Well, let's introduce Key, shall we? And listen to this convo. Yeah. So Key Smith is an internal family systems IFS trained contemplative psychotherapist, coach, mediator, and facilitator of power conscious nonviolent communication, and also an affiliated teacher with the Right Use of Power Institute. Key works with individuals, dyads, and groups to support group restoration, healing, and transformation. She is passionate about co-creating beloved community where collective care is valued, collective wisdom is centered, and collective power is strengthened. So please enjoy my conversation with Key Smith. Are you feeling the seismic shifts currently reshaping the therapy field? From AI to rising healthcare costs, our field is at a crossroads. But what if these disruptions weren't just challenges, but opportunities for transformation? I'm excited to introduce Redefining the Future of Psychotherapy, a groundbreaking 12-week program where I've partnered with organizational consultant Marc Mathys to help therapists navigate and thrive in these challenging times. Together, we'll explore how cultural values and systemic forces are impacting mental health care. You'll learn to apply powerful frameworks like spiral dynamics to enhance your practice, transform challenges into opportunities, and develop practical strategies for both you and your clients. Starting February 13th, 2025, we'll meet virtually every Thursday for live interactive sessions. You'll earn a Level 1 certification in spiral dynamics, and up to 24 CEUs are available. This isn't just about surviving these tumultuous times. It's about working together to create positive change. Register now at tinyurl.com/futureoftherapy and join us in redefining the future of psychotherapy. That's tinyurl.com/futureoftherapy. Welcome to Conversations with a Wounded Healer.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for welcoming me.
Of course. It's so lovely to have you. We've talked about this for a minute, and I'm so glad we're finally getting to do it.
Me too. It's my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, would you like to introduce yourself to our loyal, lovely listeners?
Absolutely. My name is Key Smith. I use she and they pronouns. And the work I am doing in this world is a couple different things. I have a business called Warrior Wisdom, and under that umbrella, I'm a contemplative and internal family systems therapist, and I work with individuals and couples and people in conscious non-monogamous relationships. And then I also am a coach and a facilitator, and I teach power conscious nonviolent communication. And I'm an affiliated teacher with the Right Use of Power Institute. And then I sometimes teach in other capacities, like at Naropa University as adjunct faculty. But the main focus of the work I do with teaching is usually about compassionate communication through a power conscious lens. So it's a lot of different things, but
Yeah. And we met through Right Use of Power.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So what's your therapist origin story? That's
Oh,
my
wow.
favorite, like
Yeah.
opening line for the podcast for those who are therapists.
Right. It's a great story. So my whole background and when I did my undergrad degree was in psychology. I didn't think I was going to be a therapist necessarily at that time. And I got that degree completed way back in 2007 from James Madison University out in Virginia. And then the time between that and my degree at Naropa, which I just completed in 2022 in contemplative psychotherapy. It was a meandering journey, Sarah. I was like all over the place. I worked in mental health in various capacities. My first jobs were in very acute settings with kids who were, residential lockdown facility. We had to do protective holds and de-escalation techniques, and it was really intense. And so I did not think I wanted to be a therapist because I had such a intense entry point into that world, and an institutional setting as well. And so I kind of left that for a while, and I went and lived abroad, and I was a teacher abroad teaching English and also doing volunteer work long term in various places, Asia and South America over the course of 4 years. And in that time, I was just doing a lot of personal discovery and just figuring out who I was and what I wanted to be. And all along the way, though, I always knew, even though I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do or be, I knew kind of more and more what I didn't want to do. And it just became clear over time. I always had this deep affinity and capacity to be with people, to sit with people, and a deep love of the human experience, even when it was complex, and a lot of access to complexity and compassion cultivated by a pretty healthy upbringing and secure attachment with a couple of very skillful parents. And so I think my path kind of meandered and led me to, when I came back from all that travel, I got really involved in a meditation community. And one of my main influences was Tara Brach, who's an insight meditation practitioner that many people know of. I'm sure she's quite famous, but she's also a therapist. And I just, through a lot of her teaching and healing work that I experienced with her as a guiding teacher from afar, like through podcasts and things, I just started to feel, there are so many ways that the combination of the Buddhist perspective as well as therapy are just incredibly impactful and healing. And at the time, I was involved in a local meditation community in Portland of the same lineage where I'm from. And in that time, I encountered Naropa through just a class I was taking. It came up in conversation and I was blown away. I was like, whoa, there's a degree in Buddhist psychology that allows you to be a therapist.
Yep.
And I was like, oh my God, that sounds like exactly the next thing for me. And I started to check it out. And in my life, I've had a lot of real sacral gut knowing of when things are right for me and when they're not. And it was just this overwhelming sense of, this is the thing. This is how I should proceed. And it would give me access to sitting with people with a credential that, gives me permission in the supremacy system that we live in, but gives also a lot more space, because contemplative psychotherapy is not quite the same as many Western modalities of psychotherapy. And then in that process, I also encountered internal family systems, which is also quite different than many other. So that's how I came to it. And I think I would not be a therapist if I wasn't able to have access to these kind of bottom up ways of meeting people in their healing journey, rather than top down, from the Western psychotherapy perspective, sort of problematizing mental health challenges and sort of, just a perspective that's very fix it oriented versus be with it. So yeah, that's a nutshell version
and
of how I came to it.
That's such a good way to say it, the be with it instead of fix it. And I told you before we started, I'm struggling now in the university that I'm teaching because I am a be with it type of therapist. But I'm teaching students in a fix it environment, and we're in a fix it world, right? So it's not, it's not just like my students and my university are the problem, but it's, well, before we go there, I was just really curious, what is your Enneagram?
My Enneagram, I am the 2, I believe, the helper type, but sometimes I show up as a 9 too, the peacemaker.
Okay.
But it's kind of interesting. I haven't looked at that in years though, so I'm interested to do it again. It's been a while.
Yeah.
More recently, I've looked at the human design model, and that one is really fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with that?
A little bit, and I had somebody on many, many years ago, Robin Wynn. So if people want to go back and check out that episode, she did a whole reading for me, and I think because I've been interested in learning astrology, that is so complicated, and I'm like, I can't do the complicated thing right now.
Human design is really complicated.
Really
it's 5 different modalities or something.
Yeah. And I was just curious because I've been feeling like 4 energy, but 2s go to 4 in health.
It's true. Yeah. And remind me the 4, what's the name of that
4
one?
is the individualist, the artist. There's always
interesting,
an inward looking kind of feel. Yeah. 4s get a bad rap. But when a 4 is really healthy, it's really beautiful. And so I was just curious about that.
Interesting. Yeah. I'll have to look back at that again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what you're seeing in the kind of state of the field right now, because that's something I'm really interested in. And from this more Buddhist be with it sort of lens, because it feels like we're at a choice point. We're at a crossroads. We're at an invitation to evolution.
Yes.
And I'm curious from your perspective, how you're holding this, what you're seeing, what you're looking at.
Yeah. I deeply resonate with that perspective. And this brings in for me something else we were talking about before we started today, which is, I really orient from more and more from a developmental view when working with people. And I think that this really comes into the question that you're asking, where is the field right now? What's happening? And so there's a particular model of adult development that I work with. It's Robert Kegan's model that's called subject-object theory. And even my thesis was kind of centered around this. My thesis was called Coming Home to Belonging, and it was all about the core wound that we're experiencing in the modern world is all rooted in separation from the earth. And integrating that with Kegan's theory of development, that's an eco-psychology perspective I kind of got from Paul Shepard and a couple of different, eco-psychologists. But the integration with Robert Kegan, he has the perspective that most of modern North American culture, humans, are kind of stuck in a developmental stage called socialized mind. Okay. And it is what it sounds like. The way we've been socialized is the way that we think, the way that we relate. And this is called third order mind. It's the middle of a 5-stage model. And so the earlier stages are, younger, but this stage really is characterized by some of the things we're seeing in the culture and also in the field, a lot of right, wrong thinking, a lot of not quite black and white. There's a little more nuance than that, but there's the tribalism of the political field that we're in. There's a lot of, and at the root of this is deep fear and realistic fear based on if I go against that socialization, I will not belong. So here we are coming back to coming home to belonging, right? And then the stages after that in Kegan's model are self-authorship and self-transformation. And self-authorship, again, is what it sounds like when we start to write our own story and we start to say, oh, wait a minute, this, whatever it was that I've been socialized to believe is maybe part of the truth, but it's not the whole truth. And there's so much more to me than fits into whatever boxes I've been socialized to believe in. And so the bridge between self-authorship and socialized mind, that balcony of development is so painful. In many spiritual traditions, that's the dark night of the soul, because you lose people, you lose community. And if you don't have somewhere to land, if you don't have somewhere to call home, it can be a really dark and difficult time. And so bringing that into your question about the field, there's a few different things to say about this is in the therapy seat, when we're sitting with people, we might be their only place that they can fully belong as therapists.
Yeah.
There's a moral imperative for us to be able to sit with people with whatever it is alive for them, which is that being with rather than fixing it.
Yep.
Because fixing it comes from that socialized mind perspective of something's wrong and you got to fit in.
Yep.
Versus being with is a very self-authoring perspective. Like, what's alive for you and can it be here? I can be here with you with that. And I'm willing to help you be here with that. But following their lead, trusting, their boundaries, that's another part of it too, because, so much of healing comes from helping people trust themselves. And so, that integrates into why I love internal family systems, because it's all about that model is very rooted in all of us are good. All the parts of us are good. Just like contemplative psychotherapy says, brilliant sanity, basic goodness are the center of who we are. So all the parts are good. So if you have a part that's like, no, I don't want to talk about it, turn towards that part. Yeah, you don't want to talk about it. Let's listen to that. What's that about? What are you afraid of?
Mm-hmm.
Can we be with that? Can we be with that? And not, pushing through those boundaries. And so, I think your initial question, where's the field at with this, is on this balcony. It's between the balcony of socialized mind and self-authorship, because things like IFS, contemplative psychotherapy, even like ACT therapy, which is almost the same as nonviolent communication, which is a big part of my life. There are all of these modalities that are leaning into, the roots of mindfulness that come from all different lineages, from Buddhist traditions. IFS is very shamanic. There are so many parts work models that, indigenous ways of knowing that have known this forever. It's just like, coming into the main culture through the IFS model that Dick Schwartz created and co-created with other people. But a lot of that is like exploding. Like when I did my IFS training, there were people in it who'd been on that wait list for 7 years. Like it's so much hunger for that self-authorship space, for the place of like, wait a minute, the healing comes through being with. And yet, those earlier, the socialized mind, like teaching people tools and skills is much more coming from those earlier stages. And people need those things. Like we need the skills and we need the tools, but they don't really take us very far if we're not able to be with the depth of whatever is happening for us. There's like a limit there to how far we can go. So it was a long answer. I hope it.
No, that's perfect. That's exactly what I wanted. I mean, this is a big question. So here's my struggle. And this is like, I know where it comes from, right? My parents didn't do their work. I will forever be mad at them. I'm still working through it in therapy, right? They're dead, but who cares, right? It's still alive.
Yeah.
And so I hold therapists accountable to doing their own healing, right? This is the
yes,
right. Like this is the pain point within me that I desperately want all therapists to evolve as much as humanly possible. So A, they don't cause harm, and B, they can actually help instead of being just a Band-Aid. And it gets me in trouble on the regular right now. And I really wish and I do I do in therapy, I do it when I meditate, like sort of trying to calm this piece down. But I think because we're in a time of crisis globally, it's so hard for me to not be in that urgency of, but you really fucking have to change right now because we are in a crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I respect and honor that, and I'm aligned with you in that and even in my program in Europa, going through the contemplative psychotherapy, Buddhist psychology masters there. So a big bridge for me between I don't want to be a therapist, and no, actually I do, was what you're talking about, was this shift of my actual entry into that was working with nonviolent communication, because in the 2016 election, that's when I started doing NVC. I was like, I'd heard about NVC for a long time, and that election showed to me so much of my own stuff. I was like, wow, I don't even know how I can be in the same room with someone who voted differently than me, let alone like, I was so how many of us, especially, I'm a cis white woman, and I have other down power identities, queer, polyamorous, various other things, but those up power identities had really blinded me from seeing the actual state of things. And, I was just as shocked as so many of us were, where other people in down status power probably weren't as shocked by that in many ways.
Right.
And so, I just saw it as a real wake up call of like, I have some work to do, like on myself in big ways to become more aware, but also I wasn't yet wanting to be a therapist, but I did know I've always kind of known it was a healer in some way and hadn't figured out what that was going to look like yet. But like, I need to be able to be with people, whoever they are. So that I started to work with NVC, and in that space, that was when I realized, oh, I can be a therapist, because such a core teaching of NVC is about this, what we're talking about, being with rather than doing. And I remember a moment when my teacher, Kathy Marchant out in Portland, she's phenomenal, was saying like, working with something really difficult and alive in my life, she just sort of gave me this like very clear, what if we could just hear, what the feelings are, and can you connect those to the needs? And it was like, that's core NVC teaching. And it was just like, whoa, I don't actually have to argue. I don't have to defend myself. And actually, I don't have to figure out what this other person is trying to say to me in this, novel text message of the, all of these different things they're trying to say. I just have to listen for the feelings and needs. I can do that. I can be with that. I can listen to my own feelings and needs. I can do that. I can be with that. And so then I started to feel like, I think I can sit with people. And it was that shift from doing to being. And then, that led into the Naropa. By the time I found Naropa, I'd been working with NVC for like 3 or 4 years, and I was already teaching it. And what called to me about it was that was what it was about. And so much of that program, like the whole first year, is really focused on the therapist's inner work. And really the whole thing is this program, like we go on meditation retreats, it's a cohort model. The cohort is kind of designed sometimes unethically, but also in good ways to show you like all of your shit. It really comes out because it replicates family systems and all kinds of things. And so, I really feel that, and I was told this by many of my teachers, and I believe it to be true, I can't take people places I haven't been myself.
Can you say that again one more time for the people in the back?
I cannot take people to places that I have not been myself. And actually, I want to adjust that to say, I can't be with people in places that they are, that I have not been myself. I can offer to kind of, there is such a thing as being able to be compassionate and present to things that we don't understand. That is totally possible. But the more I'm willing to actually go into my own shadow deeply and turn towards it with curiosity and with support, like to get help with that, to not think that I can do that on my own. And, I've worked with many guides, many teachers, lots of medicine work too, lots of big shadow work with some of the big plant medicines. Those experiences are what have allowed me to sit with people when they are in the depth of their shadow and not shrink back from it, and notice my own parts that arise and be curious about that, and help my own like therapist parts that want to help and want to fix in my own inner world, turn to those parts and say, honey, I got this, relax. So I can sit here and be with this and not have those parts interrupting and trying to help and fix. Because good intentions, beautiful intentions, but not being able to stay with whatever's happening totally prevents people from actually getting to the root of the suffering and being able to transmute anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You're really helping me with a meta process right now as I contemplate working with my students around this very thing and recognizing with it. And I've known this before, but like just with this acute situation, it's bringing up like I'm a catalyst, whether I like it or not.
That's right.
Just by being. I know that I don't have to try, but I think sometimes I can be heavy-handed in wanting to catalyze rather than just allowing it to happen. And it's so complex when I'm in the role of a teacher, when it is my job to teach. And yet I can't teach those who don't want to be taught what I have to teach.
Yes. that is the hardest thing for our manager therapist parts to accept. I have to say. And I sit in teaching role a lot. And so, it's a really tricky balance. I work with it myself too. And I think that, one of the shadow sides of like contemplative psychotherapy is sort of one of the people who co-created that, Trungpa Rinpoche, who's a really complex figure with a lot of shadow. But, he in the 70s would talk about idiot compassion, which is not my favorite phrase because it's a little bit aggressive. But, he's talking about, well, the way that I understand that and translate it is like sometimes the shadow side of contemplative psychotherapy in this aspect of like, can we be with it? Can we sit with it? Is like too much spaciousness, just like this wide open space of just like that kind of can become apathy or can become nihilistic or can become sort of like, well, let's just let anything be here. And it's a bypass, and it can be a bypass for harm. And so, when sitting with clients, like,
Right.
I think there's a lot to be done around like integrating different perspectives. And it's being with is not doing nothing. It's not absolutely doing nothing.
Right.
And another wonderful mentor of mine, Amanda Aguilera, who's been on this podcast, joked with me in a way about this early on in my work with her about like what we're doing when we're sitting in therapy and teaching. She's a part of the Right Use of Power Institute. When we're teaching people power dynamics, it's actually, skillful manipulation. And I want to say that kind of, carefully because
interpersonal effectiveness.
Yeah. And it's also like people are consenting to this. Like they're coming, they want the influence, they want the help, they want to be taught, and they want to be healed. So, it's that balance of so much of it is about we need to be able to sit with and be with, but also finding that growing edge with people and like attuning to what they're asking for.
Mm-hmm.
And, often it comes to me that with right use of power in particular, there are times when we absolutely must intervene, and we must like do more than be with. We need to use our power wisely and well to have that like skillful manipulation, like that impact on like helping people see what they can't see. And it's also true in the developmental model, you can never talk people into later stages of development. They get there in their own time. But the catalyst for it, as you said, is relational developmental demands. So the only thing that makes us grow is being in relationship, and having developmental demands happen through relationship.
Yeah.
And I also want to say that's not just human relationship. That is relationship with the earth. That is relationship with spirit. That is relationship with, the trees and the animals and community and collective, but also individual. And so, when we sit with people as therapists, we're in this space of supporting people and, contacting those relational developmental demands, but it's also not like, I'm here to teach you. It's more like I'm here to be a mirror to what's happening for you.
Right.
And then, that experience you have of people pushing back, that is such a choice point of like, okay, so how do I meet them in this moment? And personally, I have found curiosity is the best catalyst for change.
Right.
Like turning it back on them with curiosity, like observation. This is NVC again. Like, this is what I'm seeing. And when I see this, this is what I feel. And I'm curious, what comes up for you when I say that.
Right.
And it just shows you so much, and sometimes shows the other person things that they're not seeing,
Right. And it's so, because I'm thinking of this now in the context of my class, it is so challenging when it's 24 against 1. Right? Like one-on-one, I have zero problem with doing that. But when it's 24 individuals with very specific needs that I often don't know, right? Because they're not expressing them. And there's a whole thing around that. But right now I'm thinking about too, because most of my therapy clients are therapists right now. I think I've been spoiled by their capacity to be like, oh, I'm having resistance instead of just being resistant, right?
Yes, and that little bit of space.
Right. It is. It's that space where then you can still maintain relationship and challenge someone. But man, like we're talking about the fine levels of this stuff.
Yeah. And you're right. I think, in a class, especially within an institution, anywhere you have, more than one person, you have a developmental spread.
Right.
So you have the more developmental spread is going on, the more it takes a lot of refinement. And it is kind of impossible to meet every single person where they are in such a group. And I think what you named, though, the reflection I have is that the access point for me when I'm teaching groups always is like, where is that opening where I can help create a little more space? And I don't always know, it's like always, but you try things, it's like, okay, I see what's happening here. What's the little way that I can like get a little wedge into that little crack where the light's coming through and create more space. And usually it's almost always curiosity. Like I have to get my teacher manager part. I have to notice her first. Oh, hello, you're here. You really want and turn towards her inside of me like, yeah, you're really concerned about the state of the world and you really want to help these people who are in this role of helping. And I see you. I see how you want to teach. I see how you want to educate. I see how you want to inform. Thank you so much. You're so helpful. And I'm going to need you to relax, honey, because that actually isn't going to help right now. And then can I invite in this moment, I had oh my God, in a training with Right Use of Power, the Power and Equity Challenge that I was a part of as a facilitator, but also a participant. Dr. Sherry Taylor, who's incredible, did a great thing in live real time with someone who was really having a challenge in the class, like something brought up a lot for somebody. And in that moment, as the facilitator, this person was bringing this up and it could have been like one of those explosive moments when you lose the group.
Yeah.
And Sherry just said, would it be all right if I breathe with you right now? And we all breathed.
Oof.
And then she did a lot of other like very skillful things after that. But to me, that was such an educational moment for me as a facilitator.
Yes.
Like she totally did what I just was talking about in whatever way is her way. I don't know her inner world, but she didn't let her teacher manager like hijack that and try to like explain or defend or like help whatever, in that way. But instead was like, wow, this is here for you. Can we be with this? And it completely created a container that gave permission for all of the messiness. At least that's how I experienced it. It was very much a moment of the group that we're, about to be. It was the first or second unit of like a year-long thing. It created this like dropping into, oh, this is what we're here for. We're here to look at this together and be with it.
Right.
So those little openings, where are they and how do we open them wider instead of like going towards the teaching in that moment,
Right. And that's, I think, this is what's happening with the polarization in the US right now, right? That we seem to, on a large scale, have lost our capacity to recognize the humanity of the other. And, to go back to the NVC, right? Feelings and needs and what has to be alive or connected or grounded within myself that I can then extend that outward. And that's again where I go back to therapists and I watch like the therapist Facebook's devolving especially since the genocide in Gaza started, right? Like there's so much conflict within the therapy community. I felt okay. I think I felt okay in the world until I saw my therapist people go down. And now I'm like, oh, I feel alone. I know I'm not alone because I've got Right Use of Power, thank God. Like what a community to be with. And I got to assist in a training yesterday and I was like, there is nowhere in the world I would rather be before the election. Yeah. For folks who are listening, we're talking right before the election. I know this is probably going to come out next year, but to have community like that is...
It's essential.
I want to say that it also feels rare, but I don't want to say rare in a scarcity way. I mean it more as like to be with people who are practicing, because I was just going to say like in alignment. They're not in alignment, they're practicing alignment. They're practicing integrity.
That's it. Yeah. And I think you're pointing to, Right Use of Power very much is, what Keegan would call like a developmental organization, meaning that they're constantly like trying to make clearer like what might be missing. And, they just started doing this wonderful rock the boat circle internally where we all can show up and challenge the core ideas and teachings and look together at what might be missing. And those kinds of communities, I think when you say rare, and you're not wanting to come from that scarcity place, I think there's a lot in that the rareness of it is complex because I actually really agree with you. It isn't rare in the sense that what that exists deeply within all of us, like that full capacity. And what eco-psychology and Keegan are saying is that the full ontology of our human development is not even just self-authorship, it's also self-transformation, which I didn't even get to. But that stage is characterized by deep embodied knowing of interdependence, deep knowing of I am you.
Yeah.
And Keegan would say, like, people in that stage are often like laughing and crying at the same time, because it's like everything matters and nothing matters, but in not a nihilistic way. And the truth is, this is so deeply who we are. It is the full potential of our being. But, the causes and conditions that are not, we can't place blame on anyone. Like, modern agriculture happened because it was like the natural, there's so many reasons why it happened, but it's not like we can say that's a bad thing, or that any one person created that. It was just like modernity and the way that it's unfolding. And there's so much to unpack with that. I want to just like name that. Like, I haven't gotten into all the detail of that and probably won't here, but the truth is that, like, if we can start to come back together in community in this way, and it is happening. There are so many pockets of community like this that are just really beautiful and rich and kind of developmental communities. That's sort of how I think we access the full ontology of our development that is here, absolutely abundantly, fully within us, and also all around us. The other than human world is like so far beyond this. Lama Rod Owens is another one of my teachers and one I follow.
Who's also been on the pod.
Oh, I'm so glad. That's so cool. I was with him on retreat in May, and something he said in passing on that retreat was, we were doing really big work. This group of people had showed up to work. Oh my goodness. And we were doing, a lot of guided practices and working with the unseen, with ancestors and with the earth and with the spirits of the land where we were in Colorado. And, he just in passing was talking about, well, like plant beings are so far beyond human consciousness. They've been here so long, and that to me is like,
just like,
of course, obviously, and the more that I do my own healing work and sit with my ancestors and sit with the unseen, there is this, what you're talking about. It is not scarcity. Like, this kind of community is all around us, quite literally all the time. And sitting with the earth is revealing that to me more and more, that the community that we need is not just the human community. It's deeply reconnecting with the community of spirit of our tree relatives and stone relatives and animal relatives who are like fully conscious of interdependence. They absolutely are, and never forgot that. And it will help us.
I got my
home.
Stone relative right here in my hand.
Yeah, I've got quite a few of them here on my desk. Yeah.
Well, and I want to draw a direct line, for listeners. I guess I want to say really publicly, the podcast keeps changing as I change. And I think I've changed since I've updated the website. And as you were talking about, we can't just blame agriculture for the reasons that humans are no longer connected to the land. And I think that way too about, we can't just say, oh, capitalism is the problem. We can't just say, oh, racism is the problem. Like, there's all of these things that are happening that are the problem. And yet we can't just say that and then like be like diametrically opposed, because what you're talking about here is anti-racism work without talking about racism. Because that's one of the things that I've learned from, I think, a lot of folks like Lama Rod who are helping people, white people specifically, remember, oh yeah, we have ancestors too.
That's right.
And that has sort of been forgotten, in the modernity of whiteness. So I want to draw that line for people that this is anti-racism work.
Oh, yeah.
And you don't even have to say the word racism.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, I touched on this in my thesis too, just about that whiteness, as we know, is like this monolith that swallows up culture and identity and ancestor and connection and like relationship. And it is absolutely anti-racism work, and also just, to me, an incredibly, perhaps, maybe this is a bold statement, the most important work that anyone can do to actually like reconnect with ancestry and sit and be with that and support our ancestors in their healing. But we have to do our own first. Like, I couldn't I couldn't begin to even contact the kind of, ancestral work that I'm starting to be in a relationship with if I wasn't able to sit with myself Like
Yeah.
there's no way that could begin to unfold.
Right.
So much of it for those of us in up status power as white people on this earth, I think it is the call of our time to deeply sit with ourselves in order to also sit with the lineages and the things that, how we got to where we are from a place of compassion and curiosity and willingness to disrupt those patterns rather than fear. Like fear ain't gonna
Yes.
do it. We're not gonna get there through fear, which is where domination comes from. It's a recreation of a domination system when we're afraid to
Right.
be with ourselves. It's an internalization of supremacy culture when we're afraid to be with ourselves. The culture
Yes.
has completely gaslit us into not
Yep.
trusting ourselves. And that's also comes into all this ancestor work and the unseen. Like, I don't know if
Yeah.
you probably know the Emerald podcast. I adore.
No.
Oh my gosh, I'm going to plug them here. I can't remember his last name. Josh is his first name, Joshua, but he's a white guy doing his work. He's incredible. Just has a lot of a relationship with the unseen and does a lot of training and stuff for people who are doing this kind of work in the world. But a lot of things that he has to say are very much about what we're talking about here around how supremacy culture like impacts our relationship to the unseen. Like one of his episodes is like a 2-part episode for intuitives that absolutely rocked my world. He talked about, how most cultures across the globe have relationship with ancestor, like deep relationship. And it's so common that like, he uses this pithy thing of saying like, if a coconut falls from a tree, the common response is hello, ancestor. Like they're here. They're all around. But in puritanical cultures like this one, it's been so trained out of us because of fear and because of this like this shadow of this like dismissal of being able to be with the unseen, like, witches being burned and all of that coming from this place of that the unseen is dangerous because we can't control it, and all of these different things. But it's so paradoxical because it is us. We will be those ancestors. They are who we are.
Right.
And so this work of like
Right.
actually coming home to ourselves, sitting with ourselves, being with ourselves is the beginning of, the more in touch we are with our own direct experience and the more we trust ourselves and we start to actually feel the relationship. Like, I don't know about you, Sarah, but in my own healing, like there have been wild things that have become accessible to me when I sit with a tree
Yes.
that were not available before I started that healing journey. Like that I can feel things and see things and hear things coming from the earth. And not just when I'm like in medicine, like it's and I think, medicine journey and the ways that's becoming more and more available is another sign of the moment we're in and giving people a lot more access to like believing that, oh, this is actually real.
Right.
This is not just in my imagination. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of healing, would you consider yourself a healer?
Absolutely. Yeah, that was something that I always felt intuitively, but had like what we're talking about, this like being gaslit by supremacy culture, sort of denied in myself for a long time and probably wasn't aware that I was in denial of it. It's just sort of, we minimize ourselves, especially people in down status power, being conditioned as a woman. There's a lot around not believing yourself, not trusting your own capacity, not being empowered. But yeah, over time, I've just shifted that through my own healing journey. And Lamarad has been a big part of that too. He's just got such clarity about like the more you step into what you are here to do, the more confidence that you can embody, like from that sourced place, sourcing from something larger than you, which we teach in Right Use of Power as well. And also within you, like there's so much that becomes available. There's so much what you're talking about. There's abundance of like support and community that comes through, and it comes through in a very like real way, like embodied way. Like the people that have shown up in my life, the more that I embrace the fullness of my original medicine is one way I like to say that. But it takes a lot. And this is coming back to your original question. Like, this is why therapists need to heal themselves. Like, to be fully in your power is actually the way that other people get empowered. self energy in IFS, this essence of who we are that is calm and compassionate and curious and grounded and spacious and all of that. The more we sit with ourselves with that kindness and compassion, it comes through. And IFS says self energy draws out self energy in other people.
Yeah.
And that's to me what being a healer is.
Exactly. And I am supposed to ask you how you feel about being a wounded healer, but I don't want to.
Why
I don't
not?
want you to answer that because the way that I've already interrupted the flow. It's over. What you just said was just so beautiful and poignant and feels like a period. It doesn't feel like an ellipsis.
Well,
You can answer it if you want because I already ruined it.
there's one thing that comes to me right from that, which is, a dear friend who used to be one of my, she was my supervisor when I worked in hospice for a while as a community educator for hospice, but she was my supervisor. She gave me, when I left that job, like a goodbye card, and the card on the front of it has like a woman seated in a meditation pose, and it says, they called her a witch because she knew how to heal herself. And I keep that card like close by all the time because it's absolutely what we were just talking about. Like part of my embracing of I am a witch. It's something I've been embracing and hearing from my ancestors. And, Adrienne Marie Brown, another mentor and like beautiful teacher of mine, like from a distance, I don't know her personally, has this whole
I was like, let's get her on the pod.
Oh my God, I'd love to have her on your pod. It'd be amazing.
I know.
But she's friends with Lama Rod, so that might be your in.
It's true.
She has a whole series on her podcast, which she does with her sister, Autumn Brown. That podcast is How to Survive the End of the World. And she did a whole series on witching. And she defines witch work as any healing work in the natural world, whether that is like, sound healing and shamanic work and things like that, or being a therapist or just sitting with people, just all kinds of things. And that's really helped me to reclaim that. But also it's a part of my unhooking from the supremacy culture and the internalizing of gaslighting myself and saying like, oh, I can't be that. That's not true. And just the deep like clarity I have from the ancestor work I've done being reflected back to me. Yes, you are this. You are a healer. You are a witch. That's actually in my lineage in many ways. I have Celtic and German ancestry. And, this being a witch because I know how to heal myself, like that is like the core of what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
It's the thread through our whole conversation is this, like, we have to actually sit with ourselves in order to heal. And when we can, there is ripples all around us, all of the people that we are in relationship with. Self energy draws out self energy. Healing ourselves supports others in doing their own healing. This is what it is to be a healer, is to heal ourselves.
That's it. I don't want to say anything, but I have to wrap up the podcast. But that's it. That's it. People want to work with you, be around you. Where do they find you?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. So I do a lot of things. My website is the best way to find me, which is warriorwisdomnvc.com, like nonviolent communication. And I do have an upcoming 12-week course in power conscious nonviolent communication, which also weaves everything that I do in that class is woven through an IFS perspective. So there's meeting our parts as we work with all of that and teaching the core teachings of nonviolent communication with this power conscious view. Because I just want to say, without that, NVC has beautiful bones, but there's a lot that's missing. And so the power conscious things that Sarah and I have been talking about are really essential to just helping do the least amount of harm and actually use NVC as a really skillful tool for healing. So that's on the website. It starts in February, but I also do like intros to that are free. So I have like a free intro workshop coming up in February too.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'd love to see folks there. And I also am a therapist and a coach, and you can find me there on my website and schedule a free consult with me. I also do mediation work with communities and whatnot. So that's another thing to think about. If you would like that kind of help, I'm here.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I think I told you when we first like chatted outside of Rupee that when you were part of, I can't even remember if it was the basics or the core training or what it was, but I was like, we need to be friends. I just like instantly was attracted to your energy. And so I'm so grateful that I do get to call you a colleague and a friend and that you shared yourself with us today.
I'm so grateful too. This has been a wonderful conversation, Sarah. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks to our guest for an amazing conversation today. To find out more about today's guest, you can visit www.headheartbiztherapy.com/podcast.
You can find Sarah at Head Heart Biz Therapy on Facebook and Instagram.
And you can find Anne at Spare Room Wellness or spareroomwellness.com.
Thanks as always to Andrea Klunder and the Creative Imposter Studios for editing, to Liam O'Donnell for the album art, and to Ben Mueller for our theme music. Until next time, bye-bye.